You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with Jamie Brown and Patty Collins. They are both world-class paratriathletes and coaches. We talk about their careers and advice they have for athletes. I hope you enjoy. Jamie, Patty, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hi.
So let's get started with Jamie. Why don't you walk us through your athletic background and how you ultimately got into paratriathlon?
First of all, I'm a below-the-knee amputee. I'm missing a couple fingers on my right side as well. I was congenital, so I was born without a fibula and was amputated at 11 months old. And then basically got my first prosthetic when I was 14 months and was walking around 16 months. And kind of hard to keep a leg on a 12, 13-month-old kid, so anything foreign. But as far as sports goes, from there on, I basically was involved with everything growing up. Nothing para-related. It was all just, playing in the streets or recreation, baseball, which is what I ended up playing through high school and college. But as a kid, I played roller hockey, football, basketball, every single sport, surfing, bodyboarding, whatever I could do to keep myself active. And then I excelled pretty well at baseball, and that got me through college. Thank goodness. It was it definitely helps when you have something that can contribute financially to get you through a private school. So,
for sure.
It worked out very well for me. And then that, I finished my playing career after 4 years at Chapman University, and then went back to coach at my high school. So I kind of stopped doing sports altogether and was, kind of transitioned from athlete to coach. And I did that for 10 years and coached quite a few collegiate and professional athletes. One that actually just won the World Series with the Cubs this year. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
108-year curse. And I actually able to be fortunate enough to work with a kid that was on the pitching staff. So it was pretty cool. After about 8 or 9 years, I met someone that was tied to Challenge Athletes Foundation, which ironically is in San Diego, and I was in San Diego, and I had never really had any recollection of this foundation. Growing up there, all they really do is provide sporting equipment and travel grants and opportunities for people with disabilities or some sort of, whether they're in a wheelchair or amputee, for example, to get them equipment to compete again. Because most of the equipment that we need to have for any of our sports, whether it's, wheelchair rugby, whatever it might be, triathlon, for example, track and field, those legs are not covered by insurance. So they're kind of an out of your pocket cost. And I don't know if you're familiar with the price tag on some of our prosthetics, but they're not cheap.
Yeah,
it's not like buying a new pair of shoes. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So, and then if they break, we can't borrow someone. That's the other thing. So, it's quite a financial burden up front, and then obviously triathlon is not a cheap sport as well. Just being triathlon, so it's like adding another bike,
right,
to your pocketbook. But so I was connected with them, and then they actually did the first paratriathlon camp, which ironically ended up having a lot of the Paralympic athletes at. This was 6 years ago now, probably. And I didn't have a running leg. I think I got my bike literally a week before, and went to the camp and excelled individually at the sport. I could swim across the pool faster than the rest of them. I couldn't do all three together. I had zero cardiovascular strength at that point. And then I could ride a bike really fast, and I could run well without a running leg. But yeah, and then so from there I was able to acquire a running leg and then started on that in I think I had that for only 6 to 8 weeks, and then ran New York City Triathlon, which back then was an Olympic, or still is an Olympic distance, but was the national championship, and somehow found a way to win it.
Oh, wow.
I'm still not really sure how I pulled that off, but yeah, I was definitely looking over my shoulder waiting for someone to come catch me.
Right.
And then it kind of just took off from there. And then, that was right around the time that they just were petitioning to put it in the Olympics. So, and I had, at this point, never had any ambition to competing on the para level. Yeah, so, and then kind of from there, it just took off. 6 years later, I won national championships a couple of times. I've raced all over the world. I'm pretty competitive in a very difficult class. And, I'm able to hold my own with most age groupers in a regular race.
Right.
So, it's been awesome. It's definitely been something that's changed my life, the second part of my athletic career, for sure.
Yeah, and it seems like based on your story, it came quite natural to you that you immediately saw that you had a knack for it. I mean, do you attribute that to being a baseball player in terms of just the discipline of practice and being an athlete and coordination and all those types of things?
Yeah, I definitely think there is some sort of advantage to being exposed to being an athlete as a child when you're trying to, especially when you're competing at an Olympic level. I think it's very difficult for someone later on if their amputation or their disability happens later on. Now, obviously, the sports are a little different. But, yeah, I think it's a huge advantage to be exposed to sports just because, triathlon's mostly in a sagittal plane, which is straightforward. There's not a whole lot of cutting or, it's one speed, hold it, and go really hard. You don't have to turn. You don't have to react too much. But I will say, for that part, I do think it's kind of easy to transfer over later on, but triathlon itself is not easy, period. So it's not that easy. I do get a lot of people that I talk with that want to go into triathlon. I'm like, are you really sure you want to do triathlon? It's not easy for people with all their limbs. Like, it's just not an easy sport, mentally and physically. It's a grind.
Absolutely.
And then as far as the relation to baseball, yeah, I think baseball helped tremendously, just because it is a sport that you play a lot of games, and there's a lot of, I hate to use the analogy where you fail so much, the guy that goes to the Hall of Fame is the one that, fails 7 out of 10 times.
Right.
When he hits and as a pitcher, you have to be able to restart and relocate and every single pitch, so you don't get. So there's so much outside interference that can mentally take you out of your game, and the same thing happens in triathlon. I mean, from minute to minute, you're always in a different state of mind, and the person that can kind of repeat and keep themselves together, for the 60 minutes or 65 minutes of the race or 8 to 10 hours if you're doing a lot longer course or long course race, but. Yeah, no, I definitely think it's helped.
Awesome. So, Patty, can you walk us through your athletic background and how you got into paratriathlon?
Yeah, sure. I guess when I was really young and I was born able-bodied, I didn't lose my leg until I was 38, actually. I grew up around horses. That was what my parents were really into, and that was my kind of sport until I was probably in junior high, and then I dabbled in just normal school basketball, baseball, things like that. In high school, I found running. And fell in love with the sport. And although I probably had a fairly forgettable running career, I think it gave me a lot of mental toughness and just a love of going long. And then I went to college. I actually was on an Army ROTC scholarship, so I knew I was going into the military afterward. I honestly was bit by the triathlon bug by watching Julie Moss. And I know it was just the 35th anniversary of that race, so it was kind of nice to watch some of the interviews between her and Kathleen McCartney, and I'm a little bit more seasoned than some of my teammates. And so I did my first triathlon in 1989 and was kind of hooked. I wasn't a great swimmer, but I had taught swimming lessons as a kid and, rode my bike to my summer job, and I was a high school runner. So I thought, oh, sure, I can do this. And I quickly found, just like Jamie, it's a hard sport. And so, but it was something that I was immediately hooked and connected with, and, went into the Army in 91. And sometimes you have a job or you live somewhere where training is easy and racing is easy. And other times, it's a little more, you spend more time doing work or deploying or things like that. So I won't say I was a consistent racer for all that time, but it certainly was part of my life for all that time. And then I lost my leg. I came home from Iraq in 2006, and I was hit by a car riding my bicycle to work. And then subsequently elected to amputate 10 months later. Getting back into the sport was sort of a no-brainer, and that was part of my decision-making process of electing to amputate. Was, my limited current condition wasn't going to give me much mobility, but a good amputation might give me opportunity to return to things that I enjoyed. So I was back in triathlon in about a year, and similar to Jamie, the Challenge Athletes Foundation kind of contacted me, and also not as aware of para sports, but just said, "Hey, can we get you to some races? Can we help you out?" And initially I said, "Well, I'm just happy being an age grouper because that's all I knew." But they provided some opportunities for me. I became a competitive para athlete actually as a cyclist first, because running wasn't as much fun as it used to be. And then by happenstance, Paratriathlon Nationals were in Austin, Texas in 2012, and I was stationed in Texas. And it just seemed like I had a free weekend and I was going to go down and hop in this triathlon. And I think because my cycling was so strong at that time, I won, like Jamie. And then I missed going to London as a paracyclist, but my consolation prize was going to New Zealand to Paratri World. That was, a pretty nice consolation prize. I actually won there. And then, things changed and disability categories changed. And there was, as the sport grew, the more competitive athletes came on the scene. So, it got harder, but it's always been part of my life. Jamie started coaching early, and I found myself coaching later in that I just began triathlon coaching. So I'm still competing, and we'll just see what the next chapter holds. I will, I know I'm going to return to my age group roots and start going a little bit longer, but I think I'll still compete at the para level for a little bit longer.
Great. And so, Patty, you did triathlons prior to your amputation, and obviously you've now become, world class after your amputation. I mean, how did was that tough mentally to say, I used to be able to do this, and I have this new challenge? How did you overcome that challenge for yourself mentally, and how would you recommend others go about it if they have the same sort of situation?
Yeah, I can say now that I'm a better swimmer and cyclist than I ever was with two legs. And part of that is when you have something you love taken away from you and then it comes back to you, you take it. I took it a little bit more seriously. I tried to not take it for granted. Running was harder. Running is going to be harder when you have to put a prosthetic on. And it was certainly something that I did not embrace for a couple of years. And so, for me, when I talk to people and tell them how I came to my decision about amputating, I said, it's what do you want to do in life, and what is a sacrifice worth for you to get that back? And so that was kind of, that makes it really easy and quick and tidies it up nicely. There was more to it than that. But I also try and remind myself, especially when it's a hard run or you're not feeling particularly comfortable, I lost this gift at one point and it came back to me, and I learned to run as an adult. And I think most of us don't remember learning to run as a kid. You put on your sneakers or maybe not even, and you just went and you didn't think about it and it was always there. But to lose it for a little over a year and then for it to come back, I try to remind myself, this is a gift every day to have this opportunity. So try not to squander it. In tongue in cheek, I say now I'm slower, so I'm smelling the roses I always knew were there. But yeah, sure. I think anyone who's an aging athlete would like to, reminisce and say, well, I used to be able to run this fast. Well, those days aren't there, but I can still run. So right. I would say, none of us are promised anything in life. So, try and be grateful for what you do have. And then, where can you make up time, or where can you make some concessions to, improve an area?
Right. Yeah. Really, really good advice. So why don't we, talk about, for each of you, career highlight. What do you think, what would be the, the moment where you've sort of said, okay, I've arrived, or I've become world class, or just the thing that sticks out to you most. So maybe, Jamie, could you start off and just share a career highlight for us?
Wow. We're still talking about triathlon or baseball?
Well, let's do triathlon, but
it's hard for me to say because it's like every opportunity I get to race at this point. Maybe I took it for granted early in life, but it's just been so. Every time I get a chance to go out there and race, put the USA hit on is pretty memorable for me. Obviously, I guess the main race, I finished third at the World Championships in New Zealand all those years back when I was still I was very new to the sport, and then winning national championships that year as well. But yeah, I guess that New Zealand one would probably be my highlight.
Right.
And then with our sport, there's this thing called classification. To be honest with you, I've won some other races, and then they've moved me into a different one. And there is a race. It was Edmonton, which was in 2014, the grand final for ITU. And the night before the race, they moved me from one class to another, where I was in the one class. I was already ranked. I think I was ranked number 1 in the world at that moment. And I was dropped into the class where the guys all had hand amputations, which is what got them into that class. And then they bridged me, which I have a hand issue and a leg missing or foot missing. And then they put me in there, and I was able to finish in the top 10, and I beat all of the other leg amputees. So that was probably, in a very angry state, probably my biggest highlight.
Right.
I mean, literally hours before the race, I went from going where I had a chance to win the World Championship to knowing that if I finished in the top 10, that would be a major accomplishment. So
how are you able to handle that mentally and kind of recollect yourself? Because I could imagine a lot of people would just be like, totally fall apart and not even have nearly as good of a race as you ended up having.
I think Patty was actually in the room when we walked. I mean, we had a team meeting that evening or the night before the race, and they had just switched me over, and we walked in the room during the team meeting. I was the only one that wasn't in the meeting at this moment. And then I came in, and it was like someone literally just died, and it was me. Was the way it felt. But I mean, from the moment I was moved on, I was with one of my friends who actually watched was kind of viewing the classification because we need to have a representative with us. And I was fine. I mean, it is what it is. You can't control someone's decision like that. You can only control what's, in front of you. I was able to hit the toilet flush button and release all that stuff that was done that day, and then, start over the next day. And I attribute that's baseball stuff. You just got to move on real quick. You have to have a very short-term memory.
Yeah. Well, I commend you, because I think a lot of athletes would really allow that to impact the race, and you went on and had a strong race. So definitely something to be proud of. So Patty, how about yourself? What would you say one career highlight you would want to kind of point out?
Before I talk about that, I want to talk about Jamie for about 15 seconds. Jamie probably has greater mental game than any athlete I know. So he, kind of sloughs off what he was able to do after Edmonton. But it's not just that. It's pretty remarkable just to watch Jamie, wrap his mind around a race and then, make split-second decisions and always keep his head laser focused in the game. So it's pretty awesome to watch as a teammate. I probably have two. I mean, similar to Jamie, we were in the classification of just legs, and then we found ourselves in classifications with arms. And, I think the classification body did the very best that they could. And then they realized later on maybe this wasn't a bad decision. It was not our best decision. And I think they're trying to make it right this season, and we'll see how that plays out for both of us. But two highlights. One of them was racing Augusta 70.3 as an age grouper. And I went 5:32 as an age grouper, which was good enough for 11th in my age group. So I think I was most proud of that because I could walk away and go, as an age grouper, I could still hold my own. So that was really exciting for me because it took years to get back to a level of where I thought I could be. That was pretty awesome. I will say another one that's not really a race, but, like Jamie, you're a leg in a sea of hands. And I just found myself, holding the longer straw than Jamie this year when the invitational thoughts for Rio went out. I didn't think that I certainly had the season of performance that merited an invitation to Rio, but it came. And so the day I got that call, I was in complete disbelief. And our program manager called us, and I was talking to some of my teammates the day prior leading up to it, like, hey, you know what? It's really been about the journey. I mean, everyone was kind of on edge. It's been such a dream. We'd love to be in Rio, but if it's not going to happen, then think of everything we've accomplished this year and how far we've progressed the sport, et cetera. So I didn't expect the call to come to me at all. So that was maybe the first time I was speechless. So, and then calling my coach and telling Chris that I was going was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure that had to be a special night when you got notified. Obviously, a special experience being in Rio.
Yeah,
she earned every second of that race in Rio.
So we're almost out of time here. So let's end with one final question, and it's sort of broad, so you can take it wherever you want. We'll start off with Jamie, but you're both coaches. So for someone who's looking to get into paratriathlon or it's triathlon as a hobby or a career, what would be a piece of advice that you would give them, maybe on the mental side, maybe on the physical side? Just curious to hear, one or two tips you would give someone as they kind of listen to this.
I'm actually going through this right now with a new athlete that I'm not necessarily, I'm more consulting with. They're new to the sport. And I think with Rio being very successful as far as the exposure goes to para sports, I think a lot of people get caught up, already I see, the hashtags and the comments about Tokyo, and they've, you might have never even done a triathlon, or you've only done a couple triathlons. I think the first thing is don't even think about Olympics. Just go race age group. Just get consistent with your training. Get a coach, someone that can kind of put together a plan for you, and find the love for the sport. Because I see a lot of it. If this is a sport, you better love it, because you can't be good at it unless you love it. You're not gonna wing yourself through a swim, bike, run. It's too difficult of a sport. And even if you're a great individual athlete at any one of those three, but I would say get a good coach first and foremost. Find local races with race directors and see if they'll get you involved and let you become let you race their courses. And race age group, just enjoy the sport, and then if it materializes from there, you'll be noticed if you start putting up some times.
Right. Patty, how about yourself? What advice would you give athletes who are listening to this?
Yeah, I would say be courageous initially, because it can be a very intimidating sport, especially someone who didn't live their life as someone with a disability. But you got to really be courageous and say, you know what? Why not me? Give it a shot. And the other thing is that it's a game of patience, and that I think Jamie would agree. If we look back on the times that we were putting up in 2012. We thought we were fit and we thought we were fast, and then where we were in 2016 is nowhere close. And I mean, the beautiful thing about that is probably the fastest times in Rio are going to be the slowest times in Tokyo, and that's awesome. But no one's going to become, a 10-minute swimmer in a year or 2 years or 3 years. It just takes so much time. So I would say be patient, but be courageous, because if you don't try, it's always going to be no.
Right. Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, this is, in endurance sports, it's a matter of years, not months or weeks. So I think everyone needs to keep that in mind.
Oh yeah, it's just it's funny, and I don't know if it's just our mental or our attention span this day with social media, with how short-sighted, and we're so focused on the day or the month, and I'm just like, when you look at a triathlon, you're really looking Olympic-wise or some sort of humongous goal, whether it's Kona, it could be a 4 or 5 year process.
Right.
You just have to, accept the fact that it's going to take me 3 years to get, to a certain point that I'm capable of doing stuff like that.
Right.
And then, yeah, it's a very, very long process. I would never have imagined 4 years from now the times that we're putting up, and then 4 years from now how much faster it's going to get. Kind of scares me, to be honest. If I can push that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's, you brought up the Facebook or, everyone wants instant gratification these days. And your point is exactly on in endurance sports. It's you're in for the long haul there and you have to be patient. So in some way that's really appealing to me because the rest of my life is at a million miles a minute, at least with triathlon and training. I'm sort of like, okay, I know this is a multi-year project and, every day obviously is tough, but you just kind of have the discipline and you keep on the road and it eventually pays off.
Absolutely.
Well, Jamie and Patty, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks for sharing your athletic backgrounds and your paratriathlon journey. Really appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners will really enjoy hearing from you.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. We appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.